Leonardo, an 84-year-old man, was facing the daunting battle against the terminal cancer that had afflicted him. His weary eyes looked up at the ceiling of his small apartment as he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this lonely and anguished moment. Years ago, his wife and daughter had abandoned him, leaving him completely helpless. That selfish and cruel act still reverberated in his wounded heart. He remembered the endless arguments, the gradual distance, and finally the day when they simply gathered their belongings and left, without a backward glance. How could they do this to me? He would ask himself, feeling his eyes well up with tears. I'm here, fighting for my life, and they just abandoned me. His days now consisted of facing the painful symptoms of cancer, alone. There was no one left to prepare his meals, help him dress, or provide him with comfort and companionship. All that remained was the deafening silence of his home, broken only by the occasional coughing fits. With a deep sigh, Leonardo settled more comfortably on the sofa, trying to find a position that would alleviate the pains that consumed him. This would be yet another long night of loneliness and uncertainty about his future. He felt helpless and adrift, struggling to hold on to the last remnants of his strength. He remembered the times when his family was by his side, sharing moments of joy and support. Now, it all seemed so distant and unreal. Where are they when I need them the most? He would wonder, feeling a tight grip on his heart. The nights were the worst. During the day, Leonardo tried to keep his mind occupied, watching some programs on TV or flipping through old magazines. But when the darkness of night fell, his thoughts would turn to the loneliness and abandonment that tormented him. Often, he would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat and with a racing heart, plagued by nightmares. He would dream of his wife and daughter, pleading for their return, only to see them drift away, leaving him increasingly alone. In moments of clarity, Leonardo tried to understand what he had done wrong to deserve such a cruel fate. He had always considered himself a good husband and father, dedicating himself to his family with all his love and effort. Then, why had they abandoned him in this way? Tears rolled down his weathered face as he pondered these questions. He felt like a failure, a man who couldn't keep his family together. This sense of guilt and inadequacy only compounded his anguish. Gradually, Leonardo realized that his health was deteriorating further. The symptoms of cancer were worsening, leaving him weak and struggling to perform even the simplest daily tasks. He feared that if his family did not return, there would be no one to care for him when he needed it most. This prospect terrified him. Imagining himself abandoned and at the mercy of the disease, with no one to provide him with a little comfort and attention, was one of the worst realities he could face. His heart was filled with despair at the thought of this possibility. Despite everything, Leonardo still held a fragile hope that his wife and daughter would return, remorseful and willing to rekindle the family bonds. He longed for a gesture of reconciliation, something that could alleviate the loneliness that was consuming him more and more. Days passed, and Leonardo anxiously awaited any sign that his family would seek him out. Whenever he heard the sound of the doorbell, his heart would race, cherishing the possibility that it might be them. But invariably, it was only the delivery person or a neighbor looking for him. This agonizing wait only intensified his pain. He felt increasingly fragile, both physically and emotionally. Loneliness was his constant companion, an oppressive presence that accompanied him at every step. Looking out the window, Leonardo observed the world outside, where people walked together, sharing laughter and affection. That scene seemed so distant and unattainable to him. He desperately wished to be part of that community again, to feel loved and embraced. But, unfortunately, his reality was different. He was a lonely man, fighting against an implacable enemy, without the comforting presence of his family. That sense of abandonment was like an open wound that would never fully heal. Despite all the challenges, Leonardo did not lose hope that one day, his loved ones would return and reintegrate him into their lives. Perhaps, with God's help, this nightmare would have a happy ending. At least, that was what he prayed for every night before succumbing to sleep. Leonardo woke up with the usual feeling of weakness and pain. His body could no longer withstand the devastating effects of the cancer. He struggled to get up from the small sofa, where he had spent another restless night, and dragged himself to the kitchen in search of something to eat. Opening the cabinets and the refrigerator became an arduous task. His trembling hands could barely hold the utensils. After some minutes of effort, he managed to prepare a simple sandwich, which he could barely finish due to a lack of appetite. I need to eat better, but I don't have the strength for it, he murmured to himself, as he put down the half-eaten plate. He felt frustrated and powerless in the face of his own health condition. Slowly, Leonardo dragged himself to the bathroom, needing to stop a few times to catch his breath. Facing himself in the mirror was a painful task. His sunken eyes and pale skin evidenced the physical and emotional toll he was enduring. Caring for his personal hygiene had also become an ongoing struggle. Getting into the shower and washing himself required Herculean effort. Often, he had to sit in the tub, as his weakened legs could no longer support the weight of his frail body. I can't do anything on my own anymore, he lamented, as he dried himself with a towel. If only my family were here to help me. Dressing himself was another activity that left him exhausted. Buttoning his shirt, putting on socks and shoes were simple tasks that had become true challenges due to his lack of coordination and energy. Sometimes, Leonardo would give up, staying in the same clothes all day. The idea of asking a neighbor for help embarrassed him. He felt like a burden, unable to care for himself. After getting dressed with great effort, Leonardo sat down in the living room chair, staring into nothingness. His thoughts inevitably turned to the absence of his family. Why did they abandon me this way? He questioned, feeling the anger growing in his chest. He remembered the days when his wife and daughter were by his side, caring for him, making him feel loved and protected. Now, all that remained were distant memories that seemed to belong to another life. He felt betrayed and resentful. After so many years dedicated to his family, seeing them drift away in this way seemed an unforgivable injustice. How could they leave me here, alone, fighting this disease? He asked himself, his voice faltering with bitterness. Gradually, fatigue overcame Leonardo, and he ended up falling asleep in the chair. However, his sleep was not peaceful. Disturbing dreams tormented him, with images of his family rejecting and leaving him increasingly alone. When he finally woke up, hours later, Leonardo felt even more exhausted. His strength seemed to be draining away with each passing day. He looked around, contemplating the oppressive silence of his home, and felt his heart fill with sadness and despair. Without the help of his family, caring for himself had become an increasingly arduous task. Preparing meals, keeping the house clean, and managing his own hygiene had turned into true challenges. Leonardo felt defeated and powerless in the face of this reality. Many times, he wondered if he could endure this situation for much longer. The disease seemed to be winning, and the absence of his loved ones only exacerbated his anguish and suffering. Seated in his chair, Leonardo reminisced about the happy moments he had shared with his wife and daughter. The laughter they had shared, the family outings, the celebrations of special occasions. It all seemed so distant and unattainable now. Tears rolled down his face as he thought about how much his life had changed since they had abandoned him. He felt like a stranger in his own home, an intruder in his own dwelling. Trying to find strength, Leonardo got up with difficulty and walked to the window. He observed the world outside, people walking peacefully through the streets, unaware of the agony he was facing. He wished, from the bottom of his heart, that he could share in that companionship once again. But the reality was harsh and devastating. He was alone, with no one to support him in his battle against cancer. His mind filled with bitterness and resentment, as his health continued to deteriorate. That night, once again, Leonardo lay down on his sofa, hoping that sleep would bring him some relief, even if temporary. His last hope was that, somehow, his family would return and provide him with the support he so desperately needed. On a gloomy morning, Leonardo's phone rang, breaking the oppressive silence that permeated his small apartment. He answered with difficulty, his voice weak and hoarse. Hello. He said, barely mustering the strength. On the other end of the line, a soft and compassionate voice responded, Mr. Leonardo, this is Nurse Esther. Your doctor called me, concerned about your health condition. May I come to your home to see how you are doing? Leonardo was surprised and, in a way, relieved. He did not expect someone to care so much about his well-being. Yes, please come. I'm feeling very weak, he responded, a glimmer of hope igniting in his heart. Soon, the doorbell rang, and Leonardo dragged himself to the door, opening it with effort. Before him stood a middle-aged woman, with a kind smile on her face. It was Nurse Esther, who greeted him with gentleness. Hello, Mr. Leonardo. I was worried about you. May I come in and see how I can help you? She asked, her eyes reflecting genuine concern. Leonardo nodded, and with difficulty, invited her in. His home was in order, but the fatigue and illness were evident in every corner. Thank you for coming, nurse. My health has not been doing well, he said, sitting down with effort in his armchair. Esther examined Leonardo carefully, monitoring his vital signs and inquiring about his symptoms. It was clear to her that he was fighting cancer alone, without the support of his family. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. Let's start with some tests and see what we can do to improve your condition, she said, in a soft and reassuring tone. In the days that followed, Esther visited Leonardo regularly, bringing him nourishing meals, helping him with his care, and providing the necessary medications. She could see the loneliness in his eyes and how grateful he was for her presence. I don't know what I would do without you here, Esther. I feel so alone, Leonardo confessed one day, his eyes brimming with tears. My family has abandoned me, and I no longer have the strength to fight. Esther firmly held his hand with care, looking him in the eyes. Don't worry, I'm here to help you. We'll face this battle together, she responded with an encouraging smile. Gradually, Esther's presence brought a sense of comfort and hope to Leonardo's life. She became his primary source of support, caring for his physical and emotional needs with genuine dedication. In his moments of weakness, Esther would help Leonardo get up and walk, encouraging him not to give up. She urged him to eat better and take his medications correctly, looking after his health. But Esther's care went beyond just the physical aspects. She also became an attentive listener, allowing Leonardo to share his anguish and frustrations. He felt comforted to be able to unburden himself, without fear of being judged. You are the only person who truly cares about me now, Leonardo said, holding Esther's hand with gratitude. I feel so grateful to have you here. Esther smiled tenderly, gently squeezing his hand. I'm here for you, Leonardo. I won't leave you alone in this fight, she responded with determination. Gradually, Esther's presence transformed Leonardo's solitary routine. She helped him stay clean, tidy, and properly nourished. Her companionship was like a balm for the elderly man's soul, who finally felt cared for and valued. In moments of loneliness, Esther would sit beside Leonardo, talking about his life, his dreams, and his memories. She listened attentively, demonstrating empathy and understanding, which soothed his anguish. Together, they would spend entire afternoons simply conversing, laughing, and reminiscing about happy moments. This unexpected connection grew stronger with each encounter, becoming a source of comfort and hope for Leonardo. Gradually, Esther could notice an improvement in Leonardo's health condition. Although the cancer still affected him, his will to live seemed to be slowly returning. She felt gratified to be able to make a difference in the life of this lonely man. You are like an angel that God sent to help me, Leonardo said, emotionally, during one of his conversations with Esther. I don't know what would become of me without you here. Esther smiled, tenderly caressing Leonardo's face. I'll be here, by your side, until the end. You are not alone in this battle, as she responded, conveying all her strength and determination. Those words filled Leonardo's heart with hope. For the first time in a long while, he felt he could win this fight, that he was not alone. Esther had become his greatest source of comfort and inspiration. Leonardo was sitting in his armchair, observing the landscape through the window, when he heard the doorbell ring. His heart raced, hoping it was another visit from Nurse Esther, who had become his companion and support during those difficult days. However, upon opening the door, his joyful expression turned to astonishment. Before him stood his wife and daughter, with serious and distant expressions. It had been so many years since he had seen them that, for a moment, he was confused, unsure of how to react. Hello, Leonardo. Can we come in? His wife said, in a cold and impersonal tone. She didn't even greet him or show any sign of affection. Still dazed, Leonardo stepped aside, allowing them to enter. His home, which had previously felt so empty and quiet, now seemed even more oppressive with the presence of those two women who had abandoned him. What are you doing here? He asked, trying to conceal the tremor in his voice. His heart was heavy, filled with the resentment and hurt that had accumulated over the years. His daughter looked at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. We heard that you're sick, Dad. Very sick, in fact, she said, with a false smile on her lips. So, we decided to come and see how you are. Leonardo felt his stomach twist. Deep down, he knew that this visit had nothing to do with concern or remorse. They wanted something else. Yes, I'm fighting cancer, he responded, his voice faltering. But I don't need you here. Where were you when I needed help the most? His wife shrugged indifferently. Well, Leonardo, we moved on with our lives. We couldn't be tied to you forever, she said, while carefully observing the apartment. Those words were like daggers to Leonardo's heart. He felt the anger and frustration growing within him, mixed with a deep sadness. So, you came here only because of my illness? To see if I die soon so you can inherit something? He asked, looking at them with teary eyes. His daughter laughed mockingly. Oh, Dad, don't be so dramatic. Of course, we care about you. After all, you're our father. And if something happens, we need to take care of your affairs, she said, with a cynicism that left Leonardo outraged. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. His own family had returned only out of self-interest, without a trace of remorse or genuine concern. This made him feel even more alone and abandoned. You two are a bunch of opportunists, he exclaimed, his voice shaking with anger and despair. I refuse to believe that you're only here because of my inheritance. His wife and daughter exchanged glances, seeming slightly uncomfortable with Leonardo's reaction. They had not expected him to be so outraged by the situation. And now, Leonardo, there's no need to get so worked up. We just want to talk about your plans for the future, in case something happens to you, his wife said, with a condescending tone. Leonardo felt his body trembling with indignation. Plans for the future? You mean your plans, don't you? He yelled, furious. Oh well, I won't give you anything. I'm fighting for my life, and I won't let you use me like this. His daughter stepped forward, trying to calm him down. Dad, please, don't be this way. We only want to help. After all, we're your family, she said, in a false tone of concern. But Leonardo was not fooled. He knew those words were nothing but lies. They only wanted his money and possessions, not caring about his health condition. Family, he cried, with tears in his eyes. You're not my family. You abandoned me when I needed you the most. Now you want to come back, just to get my inheritance? Well, forget it. His wife and daughter seemed surprised by the vehemence of his reaction. They had not expected Leonardo to be so firm in his position. Leonardo, be reasonable. We only want what's best for you, his wife tried to argue, but he interrupted her, raising his hand. What's best for you? You only want what's best for yourselves. Now, get out of here. I don't want to see either of you anymore. My nurse, Esther, is the only one who truly cares about me, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. His wife and daughter stared at him, shocked. They had not anticipated such a strong and determined reaction. Without saying another word, they rolled their eyes and left the apartment, slamming the door behind them. Leonardo fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. He felt betrayed, deceived by the people who should have been his family. His pain and despair seemed endless. At that moment, the door opened again, and Esther came in, concerned. She had heard the yelling and witnessed the scene, and rushed to support Leonardo. What happened, my dear? She asked, enveloping him in a comforting embrace. Through sobs, Leonardo told her about the unexpected visit from his wife and daughter. Esther listened patiently, sharing his outrage and sadness. They don't deserve your tears, Leonardo. You have me, and I'll be by your side until the end, she said, gently wiping the elderly man's tears. Leonardo clung to Esther, finally feeling supported and understood. Despite the pain his family had caused him, he knew he was not alone. He had a friend, a companion, who would support him in his fight against cancer. With Esther's help, Leonardo gradually regained the strength and hope to continue his journey. He knew that as long as he had that nurse by his side, he wouldn't have to face the disease and loneliness alone. Leonardo was sitting in his favorite armchair, watching Nurse Esther attentively as she tended to his medications and prepared his lunch. In recent months, her presence had become indispensable in his life, bringing him comfort, care, and hope. As he watched her move about his small kitchen with such dedication, Leonardo felt his heart fill with gratitude. Esther had become much more than just a hired nurse. She was his companion, his friend, his reason to keep fighting. Esther, can I talk to you for a moment? He asked, his voice a little shaky. There was something important he needed to discuss with her. The nurse turned to him with a welcoming smile. Of course, Leonardo. What would you like to talk about? She responded, pulling up a chair to sit beside him. Leonardo took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. Oh well, I've been thinking a lot about my situation, and about you. About everything you've done for me during this fight. Esther observed him attentively, her eyes reflecting a sweet understanding. She knew Leonardo was going through very difficult times, and she was ready to listen and support him. I wanted to thank you, Esther. You've been the only person who truly cares about me, he continued, gently holding her hand. You saved me when I was on the verge of giving up. Esther's eyes filled with tears. She squeezed Leonardo's hand with affection, feeling the emotion overflowing in her chest. You don't need to thank me, my dear. I'm happy to be here for you, she responded, her voice wavering. Leonardo nodded, with a sad smile on his face. I know, Esther. And that's exactly why I've made a decision, he said, his voice becoming more resolute. I want to do something that shows how important you are to me. The nurse looked at him curiously. What do you mean, Leonardo? She asked, feeling her heart racing. Well, I've decided to leave my entire inheritance to you, he revealed, his eyes shining. You deserve so much more than I do. You deserve to be rewarded for everything you've done for me. Esther's eyes widened, shocked by the declaration. She shook her head, trying to process what she had just heard. Leonardo, I can't accept this. I didn't do anything for you expecting something in return, she said, still stunned. I did it because I care about you, because I'm honored to be able to care for you. He held her hands firmly, looking at her with determination. I know, Esther. And that's exactly why I want to do this. You deserve this inheritance more than anyone else. The nurse felt tears streaming down her face. Leonardo's gesture touched her deeply, showing how much he valued her and recognized the importance of her presence. But, Leonardo, what about your family? Don't they have a right to inherit your possessions? She questioned, still trying to understand the situation. Leonardo waved his hand dismissively. In my family? They abandoned me when I needed them the most. They don't deserve anything that's mine, he responded, with a bitter tone. Esther shook her head, deeply moved. I'm honored, Leonardo, but I can't accept it. It wouldn't be right, she said, squeezing his hands affectionately. But Leonardo wasn't going to give up easily. Please, Esther. Let me do this. It's the only way I have to show how important you are to me, he pleaded, his eyes begging for understanding. After a few moments of reflection, Esther finally nodded, with an emotional smile on her face. All right, Leonardo. I accept your generous offer, she said, letting the tears flow freely down her cheeks. Leonardo smiled, relieved. He knew this was the right decision. Esther had become his family, his reason for living. It was only fair that she be the heir to everything he possessed. Thank you, Esther. You deserve every penny, he said, tenderly caressing the nurse's face. You saved me when I was on the verge of giving up. Now, I want you to have the life you deserve. Esther couldn't hold back the tears. Leonardo's gesture touched her deeply, showing the greatness of his heart. She leaned in, hugging him tightly, feeling immensely grateful and honored to be a part of his life. In that moment, Leonardo felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. He knew that even if his departure was near, his inheritance would be in the hands of someone who truly cared about him and loved him. In the days that followed, Leonardo and Esther worked out all the legal details to make the donation a reality. She was reluctant, but ultimately agreed, understanding the importance of this act for Leonardo. As everything was being arranged, Leonardo felt lighter and more at peace. He knew that even after his death, Esther would be taken care of and have a comfortable life. This left him deeply relieved and serene. As his health deteriorated, Leonardo spent more time talking to Esther, sharing stories and memories. He wanted to make sure she knew all the details of his life, so that she could honor him in the way he desired. One of those afternoons, Leonardo firmly held Esther's hand and looked into her eyes. "A thank you for coming into my life, my dear friend. You gave me the peace and hope I needed to face this battle," he said, his voice soft and emotional. Esther smiled, squeezing his hand affectionately. "I should be the one thanking you, Leonardo. You gave me the opportunity to make a difference in someone's life. You will always be remembered with the greatest affection in my heart." They remained silent for a few moments, knowing that this moment was special and unique. Both understood that soon, Leonardo would depart, but his memory and legacy would live on through Esther's generosity and love. That day, Leonardo felt complete. He knew that his inheritance would be in the right hands, and that Esther would care for it with the same zeal and dedication with which she cared for him. This was his last and most important achievement in his fight against cancer. The news of Leonardo's donation of his inheritance to Nurse Esther spread quickly, leaving his family in shock and fury. His wife and daughter, who had recently returned with the hope of securing their share of the fortune, were outraged to discover that they would no longer receive anything. This is outrageous. How could Leonardo do this?" Leonardo's wife shouted, banging her fist on the lawyer's desk, who had been tasked with formalizing the donation. "This money is rightfully ours. He can't just give it all to this nurse." The lawyer, a calm and professional man, tried to explain the situation. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Leonardo's decision is final and irrevocable. He made this donation with full awareness and of his own free will," he said, maintaining his serene posture. Leonardo's daughter frowned, glaring at the lawyer with disdain. He's not in his right mind. That nurse must have manipulated him somehow," she accused, her eyes shining with anger. The lawyer shook his head firmly. "I must disagree." Mr. Leonardo was lucid and fully aware of his decision. He left us very clear instructions on how to proceed with the donation of his assets. Leonardo's wife banged her hand on the table again, her face red with fury. This is absurd. We are his family. We have the right to inherit everything he owns. We won't accept this decision," she vehemently declared, pointing an accusatory finger at the lawyer. But the professional maintained his firm and impassive posture. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Leonardo's decision is final. He left everything duly documented and signed. There is nothing you can do to reverse this donation," he explained calmly. Leonardo's daughter clenched her fists, her face contorted in an expression of hatred. "It can't be. This money is ours. We're going to sue that nurse and secure our inheritance rights," she threatened, her eyes flashing with fury. The lawyer sighed, understanding the frustration and anguish of that family. I'm sorry, but there's nothing you can do. The donation is completely legal and cannot be contested. The money now belongs to Nurse Esther, he reiterated firmly. Faced with the lawyer's categorical response, Leonardo's wife and daughter looked at each other, their hatred and indignation overflowing. They couldn't believe that their plan to secure the inheritance had been so definitively thwarted. This isn't over. We'll fight for our rights to the end, Leonardo's wife declared, her tone of voice laden with venom. That nurse won't get what's ours. The lawyer, however, remained steadfast. I'm sorry, but I can't do anything about it. The donation was made in a completely legal and irrevocable manner. From now on, the inheritance belongs to Nurse Esther, he reiterated, in a tone that left no room for argument. Leonardo's wife and daughter left the lawyer's office, their expressions contorted in a mix of anger and despair. They couldn't accept that their plan to claim the inheritance had been so definitively frustrated. This can't be happening. That nurse can't keep everything that's ours, Leonardo's daughter shouted, punching the wall with force. We'll find a way to reverse this decision. But no matter how much they tried, their efforts proved futile. The lawyer repeatedly affirmed that the donation was legal and irrevocable. There was nothing they could do to change the situation. In a last desperate act, Leonardo's wife even threatened to sue Nurse Esther, accusing her of manipulation and breach of trust. However, all her attempts were in vain, as there was no evidence to support her allegations. Gradually, Leonardo's family realized that their fight was pointless. The donation of the inheritance to Nurse Esther was a done deal, and there was nothing they could do to alter it. They had to accept, albeit with great reluctance, that the money no longer belonged to them. Frustrated and embittered, Leonardo's wife and daughter were forced to recognize their defeat. They had to swallow their pride and deal with the fact that their greed and abandonment had cost them the inheritance they so desired. Meanwhile, Esther received the news of the donation with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. She couldn't believe that Leonardo, in his final act of generosity, had decided to leave her his entire inheritance. That gesture deeply moved her, reaffirming how special she was to him. With her heart overflowing with emotion, Esther promised herself that she would honor Leonardo's memory in the best possible way. She would use that inheritance to help other people who, like him, were struggling with loneliness and illness, offering them the same care and compassion she had dedicated to Leonardo. This unexpected turn in Leonardo's family's plans marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new journey, where loyalty and love triumphed over selfish interests. The inheritance, now in Esther's hands, would be Leonardo's legacy, a way to perpetuate his memory and his generous spirit. Leonardo was lying in his bed, breathing with difficulty. In the last few days, his health had deteriorated considerably, and he felt his strength ebbing away with every moment. Yet, even in that moment of fragility, he had the comforting presence of Esther by his side. How are you feeling today, my dear? The nurse asked, with a concerned expression, as she checked Leonardo's vital signs. He smiled weakly, squeezing her hand with the little energy he had left. Honestly, I'm feeling a bit tired. But I'm glad you're here with me, he responded, his voice weak and hoarse. Esther returned the smile, tenderly caressing Leonardo's face. I will never leave you alone, Leonardo. I'm here, by your side, for whatever you need, she said, in a soft and reassuring voice. Those words deeply touched Leonardo's heart. He knew that despite all the difficulties he had faced, he had someone he could trust and find comfort in. Esther, I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for me, he said, with difficulty. You're the only one who truly cares about me." The nurse felt her eyes filling with tears. "Oh, Leonardo, you don't need to thank me. I'm happy to be here for you," she replied, squeezing his hand affectionately. Leonardo nodded, with a weary sigh. "I know, my dear. And that's why I want to ask you something," he began, his voice becoming more firm. "I want you to promise me that when I'm gone, you'll use my inheritance to help other people." Esther's eyes widened, surprised by the request. "Leonardo, don't talk like that. You're going to recover, I know it," she said, trying to contain the emotion in her voice. He smiled, with tears in his eyes. "We both know my time is coming to an end, Esther. But I want you to use that money to make a difference in someone's life, just as you did in mine." The nurse nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I promise, Leonardo. I'll use this inheritance to help those in greatest need, in your memory," she said, with determination. Leonardo squeezed her hand tightly, feeling relieved. He knew that even after his departure, his inheritance would be in the right hands, being used for good. In the following days, Leonardo began to recover slowly. Esther's presence and care seemed to be giving him the strength he needed to keep fighting. On one of those days, when he felt a little better, he asked Esther to help him sit up. He had something important to discuss. "Esther, I need to talk to my family," he said, his voice a little shaky. The nurse looked at him, surprised. "Are you sure about this, Leonardo? They didn't treat you very well the last time," she responded, concerned. He nodded, with determination. "I know, Esther. But I need to try. I want to make peace with them before it's too late." Reluctantly, Esther agreed to contact Leonardo's wife and daughter. They arrived at the apartment, visibly tense and suspicious. "What do you want, Leonardo?" his wife asked, in a cold tone. Taking a deep breath, Leonardo looked at them seriously. I want to apologize for everything that happened between us in the past," he said, his voice faltering. His daughter blinked, surprised. "Apologize? After everything you've done?" she retorted, crossing her arms. Leonardo nodded, his eyes brimming with tears. "I know I wasn't the best husband and father. And that I hurt you deeply," he admitted, with sincerity. "But I want to try to make things right, before it's too late." His wife looked at him, with an inscrutable expression. And what makes you think we'll forgive you, Leonardo? You abandoned us when we needed you the most," she said, her voice laden with resentment. Feeling increasingly weaker, Leonardo extended his hand in a gesture of pleading. Please, I beg you. I know I don't deserve it, but I need to make peace with you. I don't want to leave this world burdened with regrets." His daughter observed him for a few moments, sensing the sincerity in his words. She then sighed, relaxing her posture a little. All right, Dad. We'll try, she said, in a hesitant tone, but with a slight smile on her lips. Leonardo felt such a deep sense of relief that tears streamed down his face. He pulled his daughter and wife into a tight embrace, murmuring words of gratitude. Esther observed the scene, feeling her heart swell with emotion. She saw, in that moment, the chance for Leonardo to reconcile with his family and depart in peace. Gradually, the tension between them dissipated, making way for a feeling of regret and forgiveness. They conversed, shared memories, and finally managed to understand each other. As Leonardo's wife and daughter were preparing to leave, he gently held them back. Thank you for coming. I know I don't deserve it, but I love you, he said, his voice trembling. They returned the embrace, with tears in their eyes. We love you too, Leonardo. And we're so sorry for everything that happened, his wife responded, sincerely. In that moment, Leonardo felt his heart fill with relief and peace. He knew that despite all the difficulties, he had managed to make peace with his family. He could depart in tranquility, knowing that he had reached an understanding. In the days that followed, Leonardo continued to recover, strengthened by the reconciliation with his loved ones. He knew that his departure was near, but now he felt ready to face it. Esther remained by his side, caring for him with the same dedication as always. She knew that Leonardo's time in this world was running out, but she was happy to have witnessed such an important reconciliation. When the final moment arrived, Leonardo departed in peace, certain that he had made peace with his family and left his legacy in the hands of someone who truly cared for him. His journey in this life had come to an end, but his spirit of generosity and love would live on, thanks to Esther's dedication. This was today's story. I hope you were moved by Leonardo's story. Leave a like and comment on whether you think Leonardo did the right thing in forgiving his family.